my phone, or I didn't bring a laptop.
We expecting anyone else to join virtually?
Hey, this is Will, your planning manager. It looks like Chris and Lori are both sitting as attendees, and they should be promoted to panelists.
Okay. Okay, wanted to wait a minute or two, make sure everyone who's able to join is joining. My name is Rachel Stemich, Chair for the Deschutes County Historic Landmarks Commission. It's 5:31 on May 6th, and we'd like to bring this session to order. Joining us, we have Will Groves, Planning Director on the call. We have Lori Christopher and Chris Hording Jones, and here in person is myself and Eli Ashley and Mark Hudson. Our first order of business is our approval of minutes from the February 5th, 2024 meeting. I believe that was the special meeting we had with the commissioners. Is that right? No, that was March.
Where's the last one?
That was the last official one, was February. That was our first meeting as our new commission. Was anyone able to review the minutes?
Yep. And I'm fine with them, so I'd be motion to approve.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Our February 5th meeting minutes are officially approved. Our next order is public comments. I don't know if we had any that have come in the last couple months, whether through email or anyone online.
And there are not any that have come in via email since your last meeting.
Okay, thank you, Will.
Oh, it looks like Dennis Schmidling also has joined us as an attendee and needs to be elevated as a panelist.
Welcome, Dennis. So we'd like to get into our action items for this evening. We have a few things on our agenda. The first one, just because of us being most of us being new commissioners, we felt it was probably a good idea to go over a few of the regular meeting communications. There's a little bit of protocol involved with that, and it was something I know that some of the planners noted at our last meeting with the county commissioners. So Will, I believe you had a couple of items to mention about that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good evening. Again, Will Groves, your planning manager. Wanted to talk a little bit about, that last meeting, of course, was designed to be somewhat informal and to promote discussion, but it's just a good reminder. We thought it'd be a good opportunity to remember that normally if someone's going to speak, they would be recognized by the chair. So you'd kind of indicate to the chair that you'd like to speak about something, and then the chair would recognize you for speaking. It results in it's easier to kind of take notes in minutes when people aren't talking over each other. It's not jumping around too much. So where possible, we'd appreciate that if you're all comfortable with that. That was really the key point that came out of that for us. If there was anything else about kind of protocol or order, certainly this, Robert's Rules of Order is what governs this, but I've heard Robert's Rules of Order. It's really, it's more useful when people are disagreeing more vigorously and you need it to really preserve the rights and the ability for people to speak. So, I think that at your discretion, Chair and Commission, keeping it relatively informal is helpful. And if at some time you have to do some heavy lifting or people vigorously disagree, or you want to ensure that maybe quieter members are heard, you can rely on those techniques and tools from Robert's Rules of Order, and we'll be there to support you in that. But most of our commissions have benefited from kind of a semi-formal use of those rules with, kind of motions and seconding like you're already using, and having the chair recognize people to speak is usually sufficient to cause the meetings to go smoothly. Any thoughts from the chair or commission about this issue?
I think this is Rachel Stemage. I believe the thing that'll help, I guess, myself out is just making sure that our virtually, I feel like as long as we have good steady IET support to make sure that the meetings go smoothly. That's probably been, I think, the biggest challenge so far this year is making sure that we have that sort of visual connection still with those that are joining us virtually. Sometimes it gets a little challenging, forgetting you have an entire group behind the screen. So yeah, I think that's going to help immensely, just making sure that we're all still, in the same room together in one way or the other.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. That is helpful. I appreciate being virtual tonight. Cold has taken out my entire household, and I didn't think any of you wanted any part of that. So appreciate this opportunity. I think camera on can be really helpful because it helps you also sort of gauge, where's people's expressions are at. I definitely watch everybody's eyebrows, and if any of them shoot up to their hairline, I stop and ask them what they're interested in, or if they'd like to speak. So it can be really helpful to just gauge how people are reacting and what they're interested in. So where it's feasible, it's appreciated. All right, thank you. Anything else on this item?
I don't think so. Not from here at the dais.
All right, thank you. Well, if you're ready, I'll start. I've got a PowerPoint presentation, which is our work plan. I'm here, of course, this evening to update you on the CDD fiscal year 24 work plan, and it also has a review of our work in fiscal year 23. I'm going to switch over to a share screen here. Mode. There we go. All right. Good evening. So this is a discussion item for you this evening. This is a review of the Community Development Department's work plan. Big picture here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this work plan document, how we use it, and then look for some feedback from y'all about this work plan. This work plan, of course, you've been provided copies in your packet, and it is available online at the webpage shown. Background. So what is a work plan? It's an annual review of the past efforts for the year, the past, and proposal for the coming fiscal year. It's intended to give the Planning Commission, Historic Landmarks Commission, and Board an opportunity to give some direction on the work to be undertaken. And it's important to remember the Community Development Department is more than just planning. So you see planners with some regularity, but we also include our Building Safety Department, Code Enforcement Department, Coordinated Services, and On-Site Wastewater. What's not in the work plan? There was a reported news item that the work plan evaluated budget or fees, and that's not part of this process. So that's directed by the board and the budget committee later in the spring. So the work plan process, kind of January through April of the year, we collect Board of County Commissioner goals and objectives, changes in state law, look at grant opportunities, pick up public comments, see what we didn't get done last year. And in April, we brought the Planning Commission a public hearing, and they made a recommendation, which I'll summarize at the end of this presentation. In May, of course, here we are before the Historic Landmarks Commission for review and recommendations, and then proceeding to the board for a work session and public hearing in the coming weeks. So planning division year in review, what do we do? So the board adopted a number of amendments. They adopted the Tumalo Community Plan, the Transportation System Plan update, an amendment to allow rural accessory dwelling units. We worked our way through the comprehensive plan process, which has reached the board and received a state level award on the public engagement associated with that process. We coordinated with cities on numerous projects. And the current planners who received applications received 685 applications last year, down from 895 in 2022. So seeing kind of a decrease in work that we primarily attribute to interest rates and people holding off on projects. You can see there in our staff summary that we've been seeing declining staff numbers, where we've in the past year, we've had some layoffs, but we definitely also had some staff attrition and not backfilled. So we're trying to match our staffing to the number up to the level of work that we're asked to engage in. And that's always a challenge to get the right number of people as work fluctuates. Now let's talk a little bit about what's planned for 24-25. So we have a number of ongoing commitments. We're doing a comprehensive plan update, of course. That's our multi-year process to update the comprehensive plan. Also, the board has directed interest in our sub-region plans. So last year we committed, or actually just this year, we're finalizing the Tumalo Community Plan, but there are regional plans for the Newberry Country area as well as Terrebonne. And those are in the queue pending staff resources. We have a number of obligations associated with natural resources and hazards. In particular, this year, we're working through anticipated changes to wildfire hazard mapping under Senate Bill 762 and 80. Also a major project that's occupying a lot of the long-range planners, and Tanya Salzman, your regular liaison, is definitely involved in this, is the House Bill 3197 Clear and Objective Code Update project. I could talk about this at some great length, but in brief, there was a change in state law that made it mandatory for the county to have rules that related to the development of housing be clear and objective standards. So, words like compatibility, suitability, those have to be removed, and we have to be express about what we mean by that. One of the things in our subdivision code is that we say that the subdivision, as one of the rules it's subject to, is that it has to be orderly. And, of course, that's not clear and objective what we mean. And so we'll have to explain at some length what orderly entails in terms of the rules to apply for it. This is a really big deal. We have, of course, failed to meet housing demand in the state. It's been a big priority both for the board as well as the state legislature to improve housing delivery, primarily in cities, but also in rural areas. And one of the ways you can do that is improve certainty for projects. So we're trying to get our code to a spot where someone could reasonably read the code, figure out what they needed to do, and know if they were going to walk away with a permit or not as part of that process. We do a lot of coordination with the cities. So we're working with the city of Bend on growth management and the Parks and Recreation Department. Parks and Rec has a big project they're working on in the southeast of the city. We're coordinating with the city of La Pine to update the Newberry neighborhood and comprehensive plan designations. That's a formerly county-owned area of land that was part of trying to get some resources to improve groundwater protections in the area, in the La Pine area. We're also anticipating we'll be participating in the La Pine 2045 comprehensive plan update process, coordinating with the city of Redmond on a lot of issues. So they're updating their comprehensive plan. There's a regional training facility called Core 3 for emergency responders. We're going to work on our joint management agreement, as well as some other things like that, clear and objective standards, and some interchange questions that they have for the south of Redmond. With the City of Sisters, we continue to participate in implementation of their vision plan, participating in their UGB expansion process. And of course, you're also, the City of Sisters liaison, and for their historic issues, and we'll talk more about that in the next agenda item tonight. Housing strategies. So we've got on the queue to amend housing to county code to redefine how we approach occupancy. The state in recent years said that local jurisdictions couldn't use kinship as a basis for who could be in a house. So previously we said, you could live in a house with your family, and we defined who your family was. and the state said, no, it's, it doesn't matter for transportation, for sewer, for infrastructure, how people are related. So local governments stop regulating on that basis. So we need to update our code. Also continuing to explore options and approaches to address rural housing and homelessness as allowed under state law. You saw in your packet, there's a lot of zoning text amendments. These are the things that the historic landmarks, the Planning Commission and the board typically take the most interest in. To the extent that our other existing projects and ongoing obligations don't completely fill our time as long-range planners, we come to some of these. And I don't think I'll go, unless you have questions about them, I don't think I'll go into any of these in depth. These are text amendments to change things that relate to zoning code. And I don't know that a lot of them have overlap with the work you do. But if there were any of them that you wanted to hear more about or had questions about, when we get to the questions section here about 3 slides down, I can dig into some of these. So the Planning Commission received a similar presentation, conducted a public hearing, and deliberated. They had concluded that dark sky lighting standards were a high priority with significant public feedback. They were emphasizing housing-related items such as the family definition, childcare opportunities, and medical hardship dwellings for people who have medical conditions. They want to explore farm stand allowances and agritourism opportunities, but also were very protective of farmland. Also interested in changes to the outdoor mass gathering code. So those would be our larger festivals that occur on county land. And then finally, continued interest in updating the Newberry Country Plan. There's lots of concern about groundwater in South County and interest in innovative septic systems and how those might reduce contamination by nitrates in that aquifer. So what I've got for you tonight is an opportunity for you to provide me with some feedback that I would use to inform the board in their review of the work plan. So this can be, a discussion, you can ask questions, and then ultimately, to the extent you have feedback, I'll take notes on that. And when I present to the board, I'll let them know what issues were important to you, what you were hoping to see achieved, and in particular with a focus on what the work the Landmarks Commission does. And that concludes my presentation this evening, and I am available for discussion and questions.
I have a question. I mean, generally speaking, like you indicated, there's not necessarily a high degree of overlap between those work plan goals and the Landmark Commission. Though there are potential, I think, areas of overlap if the commission decides to engage with certain elements. But I just from the staff perspective, where would be the highest level of help, assistance, service in terms of work plan implementation from the HLC?
I would anticipate that you would show, of course, we've got our CLG grant. There's some dollars associated with that. And I think this would be an appropriate time to start to think about what those limited dollars might be put towards. Of course, we're going to talk about coordination with the City of Sisters, which is a major role. I know that preservation, May Preservation Month has been on your minds. So I think it would be interesting at this point, to the extent that you've had conversations or want to have those conversations now, to think about, what you'd like to also do in the next year. One of the things we've sort of thrown out, without expressing a preference for this, is maybe communicating to people who are listed already on our historic registers with education materials, how to maximize the chance that these historic structures aren't damaged by wildfire. That's something that the City of Sisters has undertaken, and I think it's a low cost, really low hanging fruit to preserve some important resources. We talked about other opportunities, what it might look like to look for additional grant funding or resources. I think that with the money and the resources that we have now, we have kind of a limited ability to execute it. But I've been interested in, and I think I've talked to many of you about the notion that I became a historic resource in April, turned 50. And I know so many of our resources, so things that are historic now something that was from 1974 is now historic. So we tend to think of historic as 1920. And I know that some of our partners have really done a good job of thinking about Camp Abbott and the World War II effort that was made here in Central Oregon, particularly with regard to aviation. And, I think it could be an interesting opportunity to take a look at that. I think another thing is that we know that DLCD is going through a rulemaking association with Goal 5 for cultural resources. And I expect that we'll be having ongoing discussions about that. So, that's something that's happening at a state level. It's, we don't know where that's headed right now, but to date, we don't have specific county regulations that deal with cultural resources. And in some of our regional recent applications, particularly with the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, we've gone up and met with them, and they've showed some interest in enhancing coordination on a variety of issues. We've received a list of application types that they are interested in receiving notice of, so that they can provide comment to those. We know that there's both treaty rights in Deschutes County, particularly on federal lands, as well as historic resources sites. I'm sure you're all aware those can be quite sensitive. You make a map of where the cultural resource sites are, and everyone's out there with a shovel the next day. So tremendous sensitivity as we come into that. And we're looking to the state to lead that. I see those as the from the planning perspective, those are all on my radar in terms of things I anticipate we'll be talking about in the coming year. But I'm definitely interested in what you see as relative priorities among those, or anything that I didn't bring up. Is Peter Gutowski in the room this evening? Was he able to make it over there?
Yes,
Peter, I
yes.
also want to give you an opportunity, if you believe anything I've missed there that you think would be worth bringing to their attention. This would be a good moment for that as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, if I may. Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director. I was also thinking in lines of the Goal 5 rulemaking. Commissioner Hudson and I were just chatting before the meeting started, and just this is going to kind of double up under staff comments. But it's just to provide you an update to get you thinking about how this rulemaking effort could have real interplay on the Planning Division work plan heading into fiscal year 2025. So on May 9th, there is a rulemaking meeting that is being facilitated by the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and we can provide you with a link. We'll do that tomorrow to the extent that you're interested in watching it. The materials that are available now acknowledge that the goal is to have the first rulemaking hearing on September 26th and 27th. This would be with the Land Conservation and Development Commission. And the second hearing with LCDC would occur on December 5th and 6th. This is a very high level overview of the materials that are before the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, but they have a section on definitions. There's a description of inventories for archaeological sites and landscaped areas, a section talking about protection measures that could apply directly to those two components, and an option for local government and tribes to agree to a customized procedure for communication and coordination around protection of tribal cultural resources. So this is something that, as Will noted in his remarks, that we're tracking. The county planning directors are also well aware in Oregon of this effort, and we'll be getting debriefed on it throughout the year. But I think it's a topic that warrants this commission's interest and potential participation, to the extent that you may be interested in any of these elements as it goes into rulemaking. What you could respectfully offer is to make those communications through the Board of County Commissioners. So just a kind of a housekeeping matter, if the Landmarks Commission is interested in particular policy issues, you would express that to the board, and then the board, as the elected officials, could communicate that accordingly. So that's something to be thinking about as a work plan element. I'm not trying to get in front of the HLC, but this could be one. It's an example of an item that you could highlight in the work plan that Will could identify with some of these elements that I've highlighted. to make the board aware of this project, because it is incredibly meaningful. And right now we do coordinate with the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. This happens somewhat organically through the Thornburg Destination Resort proceedings, but as an outcome of that process, the tribes respectfully asked to be engaged from a coordination standpoint on certain types of land use applications. So we, of course, have honored that. And so this relationship can be further refined as through this process and others. So those were the supplemental comments, Will, that I wanted to make, and with respect to the chair and the commissioners, for your consideration, because this is an exciting opportunity that can re-engage and highlight the type of work and the resources that we have in our community today.
I know, as I expressed before the meeting, it's something that personally in my professional life, I'll be engaged with anyways. I mean, I think it is something that requires dual review, I think, or an attentive review from the county. As you had indicated, some of the county commissioners are engaged in the LCDC process as is, but I do think, for my purposes anyways, it would be a good thing to offer to the county to directly be engaging in the outcomes of that process and making our own recommendations and things for the commissioners to consider.
Yeah, and if I may, just for clarity, I think the Board of County Commissioners are not participating on the Rules Advisory Committee, but there are county planning directors. Yes. For example, Coos County, Wasco County, they're participating and essentially not only representing their jurisdiction, but as acting as liaisons for the rest of the county planning directors. But I think that they're potentially, if you're interested, and our staff can kind of monitor this and debrief you at the next meeting. And individually, you may find that you are interested in listening to those Rules Advisory Committee meetings. But during the hearing process in September, prior to that hearing, if you are supportive or have opinion, regardless if you're supportive or not, if you have opinions about the rules that are being contemplated at a statewide level, you could express your opinions as a Landmarks Commission to the Board of County Commissioners to respectfully ask that your feedback as the Landmarks Commission be respectfully transmitted with whatever opinions the board has through this process, because that is essentially a public hearing. So this is kind of analogous to when the HLC was involved in the national registration process for the national registration of historic places. And so that's just I think that's a role that you have, and to the extent that you want to initiate that respectful request, that is certainly within your purview as acknowledged in county code. So more than anything, and kind of Will and I didn't rehearse this at all, but I think it's important to just bring this matter to your attention. And to the extent that you find that this is something worth identifying in the work plan, we can collectively, our team can collectively coordinate with you and ultimately the board, if you think that's important, to get your viewpoints to LCDC as part of this rules advisory process.
Yes, Eli.
If we were to actively participate in this process as commissioners, is there a protocol that you would look for? In other words, would we cast a vote today or take a vote to support becoming more involved? And then frankly, personally, I don't have the technical knowledge, so I'd have to rely on staff to help me with whatever I might recommend or we might recommend collectively. And based on our meeting schedule, I think our next meeting is kind of a little ways off. So
August.
Is it August? Yeah. So
I think the timing is pretty good.
Is it? Okay.
When I'll look to you to offer any responses that may help ground this. But I think for your consideration is expressing your interest in monitoring and potentially offering observations or opinions about this rulemaking process as it's prepared to go to public hearing starting in September for 2 hearings, one in September and the other being December. And that if I think you could communicate that to as part of this process that we would then relay to the board later this month, is that the Historic Landmarks Commission wants to monitor this process and may have some opinions or thoughts that they would respectfully like to share on behalf of the Landmarks Commission, and would do so respectfully in coordination with the Board of County Commissioners. Again, the Planning Commission, the Landmarks Commission, another example, the Wolf Deprivation Advisory Committee, they don't get the ability to kind of make policy recommendations, but they would do so in coordination with the Board of County Commissioners. And that's what I'm offering for your consideration if you think this is warranted. And we, as your staff, Tanya, will can help facilitate that. You know, I think it would be a noteworthy topic, an agenda topic for your meeting in August, to get a debrief from staff and potentially a Department of Land Conservation Development employee, so that it could put you in position, in coordination with the board, to offer opinions during that hearings process. Because I think I think all 36 counties will potentially be affected by this rulemaking. And I think this is right in your, with all due respect, this is in your wheelhouse, whether or not you're directly engaged day to day. But as the rulemaking is getting further refined and ultimately considered for a public hearing, you would be in an excellent position to offer your opinions and share those. And the board, you know, may not have any opinions. They may just be agreeable, and I think that's likely the case, to allow your feedback to be transmitted forward to DLCD, to LCDC ultimately, so that Deschutes County's voice is heard. And we could certainly, with the meeting in August, use our public information officer and social media expert to let the community know that this HLC is going to be having a conversation about. It doesn't mean that's a hearing, but for those that are interested, it might be a way to kind of localize or personalize, for lack of a better term, how our Landmarks Commission is receiving this information and some of the initial impressions you may have. So I don't know if I'm getting to the answer to your question, but those are my thoughts. And Will, please supplement if I'm maybe a little over my skis as I'm thinking about this in real time.
I think that was really helpful. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think that right now we're at the beginning of the process. So pending your direction, our anticipation would be to keep you apprised of what's going on. If to the extent that we receive public documents, we would forward them to you. And then as moving towards your August meeting, make sure that you have a packet that gives you a good sense of where we are in the process. You know, it may be that there are significant documents in discussion and sort of precursor thoughts about how this might all come together that you could meaningfully engage with. It's also possible that, those things may be coming relatively last minute, and, there may not be a robust framework for you to engage with at that point, but we can keep you up with the pulse of what's going on and make sure that you're ready to have those discussions. And I think Peter's suggestion is very appropriate. You wouldn't, as this commission, directly engage with that process, but you would instead provide recommendations to the board that typically they would then pass through as part of that, as their recommendations to that process. So I think that's to the extent that you're interested in that and you like that engagement process as described or as modified herein, let me know, and we'll keep that moving along.
Yeah, Will, this is Rachel. I like knowing that, some of us as representatives of the Landmarks Commission are present for, even if we weren't really, having a whole lot of other input or say into it, but just knowing that, yes, we are following the processes and we are knowledgeable about the way things are changing in the county. I think that also lends a benefit to just the general public that, in my understanding, there's actually a lot of public out there who doesn't even understand the differences in the different types of commissions at the county. So, being able to have, representatives of our commission as part of that, lengthier process, I think is awesome. Be nice to have that involvement.
I think it's the first of its kind effort from the state. So we are, as you indicated, smack dab in the heart of Warm Springs Treaty Rights area, and in part, I think Klamath as well. And I do think too that while there's going to be a set of statewide recommendations, as you indicated, there's also the potential for customizations that will be coming out of that. And my experience working with tribes is that each one is unique and has independent needs, as does each county. So I think at the very least, providing a forum for that conversation would be great. If there's any conversation needed, I would also, as you indicated, Peter, whatever kind of staff presentation that you could be provided on that LCDC results. If we can get somebody from LCDC, great. But also I'd be intrigued, you had indicated Warm Spring has a list of considerations that they would like to be informed about, just so we can, from an informed stance, kind of mix and match the reality of those state recommendations to whatever you guys have been seeing here on the ground. I think would be very helpful for me anyways. So I'd look forward to all that.
Excellent. This is Rachel again. I had, Will, during your presentation, there was a couple of things that I saw flash up on your screen share that kind of like piqued my interest, I guess. That's a good way to put it. You mentioned the, Tumalo Community Plan, and then Newberry as well. And of course, the City of Sisters. What I like about those, rural community, I don't know, pods, I guess, that we have within the county is how we can get historic preservation awareness to those smaller communities. And I'm hoping that there's a method to integrate, some of our identity from a historic perspective into those areas. And I mean, the one that I feel gets overlooked, and this is my personal opinion, but the one that gets overlooked the most, I feel, is Newberry. Anything South County, I think Sun River and La Pine area. There's a lot of historic resources that I don't feel are very well known or appreciated. And that might be one of those topics that we have, as far as maybe doing a tour at some point as well. So I'm hoping that if there's any sort of verbiage that can be placed in those sections when it has to do with those communities, whether it's Newberry or Tumalo or even Terrebonne for that matter, any of those that I don't feel have had a lot of good historic representation. I guess that's not really the way I want to say it, but just getting that awareness out to those communities as you go through those processes. And I know that each one of them's got a different kind of goal date in mind. Whether it's 2025, 35, 45. I like seeing that as understanding our communities with a good appreciation for our historic resources in those neighborhoods. The other thing, there was one that you mentioned about signage, which I thought was kind of interesting from zoning. And just thinking of this from several years ago, there was an interpretive sign that was placed at the Klein Falls location after the last of the dam was removed there. And I don't know if there's anything in the signage code having to do with interpretive signage like that. I'm just wondering if something comes up in the future at another resource, is that something within the sign code that might want to be mentioned or have some sort of provision in place? So those are the ones I had that came up. Yes, Mark.
I mean, generally speaking, to me, there's a series of goal-based activities in the work plan and in other places that kind of either are coordinated around education,
Mhm.
designation, and then kind of like this, I would say, rapidly developing cultural resource area. And there's a couple of tasks potentials under each one of those buckets. I was just wondering, as a function of a commission, in between meeting dates, whether or not we should be doing work teams. We can meet up in groups of up to 2, I think.
Mhm.
And I was just more kind of wondering if it'd be an effective way to kind of address, sort out, and maybe bring back to the next meeting, knowing that we do have a long break. And of course, it's predicated on each commissioner's time and availability and talents. But to be able to kind of take these down and come back with some concepts for conversation at the next meeting. And, within the communication rules via email or something like that, if it would be fine to just kind of break out potentially some of these things or start from a list that we've kind of gathered here today, put it out on email, and we all just kind of sign up kind of thing. For myself, I'm going to be entirely selfish, do education all day. And so that may not be my favorite one, but also kind of willing to serve at the same time and aware that I have done that.
If I may, Chair, it reminds me, I serve on the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council Board, and one of the things that they do is that they break out kind of into sub categories or sub meeting groups. So, there's a funding committee, there's you can have an executive leadership committee. It might be interesting, I don't know that we have staff resources associated with that, but to the extent that you wanted to assign sort of teams of 2 to meet up and have coffee and talk about an issue and kind of come back and as part of an agenda item in the future, report on what you learned in those subgroups, or to the extent you produce documentation associated with it, we could put those in the packet and say, the DLCD Goal 5 liaison subgroup, had coffee on, date and, reviewed the materials and have thought about it a little bit and are ready to, maybe take some leadership within the HLC associated with that. That would be really dependent on, of course, and very respectfully, all of your availabilities. I know you're each volunteers, and but that would be, I think, a very effective way that other similar boards and organizations leverage their membership.
That's an excellent suggestion, Will. I like that. I guess, is there a way we could have something like that set up to either follow up through discussion between now and our next meeting, or is it something that we'd want to maybe get going a little bit sooner rather than next August? I'm intrigued by that.
I mean, I know we're low on attendance here today, but for my purposes, I do think it's kind of a concept that, at least in terms of who wants to do what, could be put on an email and we sign up without having to engage in too much potentially pamphlet producing electronic communication kind of thing. And like I said, to my mind, we could either do it kind of very task oriented to specific tasks, or we could kind of do it topically, and just kind of had standing group style where we say, here are my skills, and maybe that aligns best with the following topics, or we could just start taking some of the tasks. I think that would be my staff and ourselves and start kind of self-assigning those was my thinking.
Right. Will, is there a summary how you just mentioned all of that is that the way you said it very eloquently, and now I'm thinking that if there was a way you could summarize each of those subgroups, then that might pique our interest as far as the ones that each of us or a couple of us would be interested in attending in the upcoming months. And Eli, I know you had a question.
Yeah, I was just going to encourage us to move a little on the faster side than waiting. So if that's possible, I would endorse that.
Yeah, this is an interesting opportunity. I'm brainstorming here as I often do in these meetings. I want to take a moment here to pause to see if Peter Gutowski has any feedback or thoughts on this before I jump further into this about sort of informal, at least providing very light support in terms of connecting small groups of you to talk about specific issue areas that we might agree on this evening. Peter, any feedback or thoughts about that?
I just have a couple of observations. I think it's mostly procedure. I think we want to do everything we can as it pertains to the HLC's communication to make sure that you're not communicating together in an email, because that would be a de facto public meeting. So I think how you want to execute it, you guys, all of you can brainstorm today or even offline. My suggestion would be to individually communicate the topics of interest, your availability, sending individual emails to our senior planner, Tanya Saltzman, who can collect that information and disperse it back into it'd be to the HLC, but it would be a blind copy. So to the extent that any of you individually had follow-up remarks, you could email back. And then Tanya could essentially be the conductor. She could pair, individual commissioners together, let the two of you communicate offline. That's not a public meeting. You could do it over a lunch, you could do it over a walk or anything in between. And then depending on what your thoughts were, and again, how much we can figure that out now, or as this process just organically unfolds, set up a time where you would want to provide your kind of individual or subgroup coordination back to Tanya so that she could put it into a packet. And then that would help inform, and this may be a standing agenda item, subgroups of certain themes. Here's kind of what was discussed, some ideas that then inform the entire HLC at your next meeting. So Will, those are my thoughts just in terms of how this could be executed, but I certainly would kind of just step down or step aside and let you talk about kind of what themes you like, what are the topics, again, how much you want to, you're welcome to spend as much time as you want tonight to kind of understand those categories. And then not that you have to make a decision today, but to share those viewpoints to Tanya, and then she can help orchestrate it.
All right. Any other comments from our commissioners online? I don't hear
Well,
any.
I'm curious about how do you see any required action items playing out, Peter, in a timely way? Looking at
Action items that come out of these subgroups, or are you, Commissioner?
I mean, if we're gonna,
are you talking about our work plan?
if we're gonna, okay. Just in terms of accelerating engagement and trying to be effective as groups or subgroups between now and next meeting.
I guess, Commissioner, the way my planner brain works is I think it's an extraordinary opportunity. First is to kind of identify topics, generally get that expressed at tonight's meeting, and then allow each landmarks commissioner to circle back to Tanya to identify, either topics or areas of interest so that subgroups can be formulated, and then allow those rich discussions to occur over the course of the summer. The utility in all of this is that our CLG grant ends in August. And these subgroups can help inform, as a starting point, what opportunities that you see that are available that can supplement momentum that's already happening now. But I think this is a much more tangible way of identifying opportunities that can inform a CLG grant application for calendar year 2025 and 2026. So the timing is excellent. Commissioner Smidling, as I think about the utility again of these opportunities, ideas, areas of interest, and let it happen organically between now and I could see it potentially, if there was interest and excitement, into the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Lori, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I really like this idea, and I like the ability to meet with another commissioner, or if there's a number of topics, we might meet with two different commissioners, but I would like to follow up on that. I think that's a good way to proceed, because we aren't going to be meeting again for almost 3 months. So I would like to see that list. I liked everything you said, Will. So yeah, I'd like us to proceed with that.
Would it be appropriate to include the ex officio members? Do they count as a majority because they're ex officio, right? So we could have really 3 members, correct? Yeah.
I would, to the first part of your question, Commissioner Ashley, I think ex officio members, of course, could participate. I think since they are members of the commission, technically their limitations are if you were making a formal vote on a matter, I think there's a certain boundary that they can't cross. I think if you brought in a third ex officio to a group, I think you're at a public meeting. We could confirm that with legal counsel, but off the cuff, I think since they are members of the commission, and they can receive public feedback, they can offer guidance, they just can't technically vote. I would exercise just caution on adding a third member to the commission, but we can confirm that with legal counsel just to make sure that that's the right interpretation.
Excellent.
Rachel? Yeah.
Yes, Mark.
I think it would be helpful at this point to start suggesting topic areas. I mean, I would suggest for a topic area for coordination with Tanya, I think the primary needs that we'll discuss coming out of the work plan as possibilities. So we discussed the cultural resource work. There was some wildfire and historic preservation education work. There was Camp Abbott designation. There was kind of general awareness and association with Historic Awareness Month. And I might be missing something, but I do think that those would be good starts. And with our ex officio members, we have how many members?
You have 2, Commissioner Hudson, you have 2 ex officio members.
Right. Okay.
Chris Fording Jones and Commissioner
Willie Cyphers.
Right.
last name memorized yet.
So we have an awkward odd number of people in this, but we might assume that somebody goes solo or can't do something. So,
Right.
I mean, I'd be fine to start with that, and anything else, I guess we want to tackle.
Right. And I think it might boil down to how many different meetups there are, depending on what kind of groups the 7 of us are all interested in. Those of us that actually have some availability to convene on some topics. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, at least if you're doing once a month, there's 3 meetings
Right.
possible between here and the next one.
And even if it's, each one of us does one of those meetings in the next 3 months, that's still, that's a lot of just connection and awareness, and input that we're gathering between our total commission. which is a great way to do it. It doesn't, fall heavily on one person's shoulders that way. Lori, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I would, so I think that's a great idea to start with those four. And are we going to discuss tonight what we would be interested in? Or do you think we can get that far? Because I would like to be involved with the Camp Abbott because it's in my backyard.
If I may, Chair, I was envisioning, and with your consideration, thoughts that we would take these topics. Tanya could send out an email following up on this meeting, asking
Okay.
people what relative priority they'd be interested in and kind of what availability they'd have if they want to meet once or twice or 3 times during that period. And then we would try to assign you to meetup groups associated with that, sort of trying to align your interest areas with your availability, and try to get people to rotate to talk, maybe talk about different topics. And if we see, there's no reason why, for example, if, multiple people were interested in one topic, if four of you were interested in one topic, we couldn't have 2 separate meetups on that topic, as well. So just to kind of make an effort to align those. So you should anticipate, if you prefer to do it this way, an email sort of outlining what we've discussed here, and then requesting your availability and interest in meeting, as well as kind of the topics you'd like to engage with in order. And we could go from there. I think that would be an orderly way to do it, but certainly if you got preferences, if you wanted to go into preferences this evening, we certainly have time for that as well.
I think with Tanya as the facilitator for that communication between us all, I think that sounds excellent. All right. Lori, did you have another question, or you still had your little hand?
Hang on.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say what Will was saying. I mean, there may be, you may be interested in more than one area, and it doesn't always have to be the same 2 people meeting up. Person 1 and person 2 could meet. The next time it might be person 2 and person 3. And the other thing I really like about this is it really gives us an opportunity to get to know each other as commissioners as well. And I think that will be really helpful and useful in future meetings.
Agreed. Yeah, I have always liked that type of interaction. And then, of course, I guess pre-pandemic, when we were actually doing some tours of historic sites in the county, those were always very, very well received and very informative. And yeah, I know we want to keep that on our to-do list of items to facilitate. So we might actually have a lot on our plates coming up if we're going to add that in, but yeah, we don't want to forget about it. So
Rachel, may I too?
yeah.
I would suggest within to Tanya's capacities
Correct.
that as new issues arise between meetings, to go ahead and collect that, and we can kind of keep this working group structure hopefully going if we like it.
Mhm.
Because there should be other issues that come up as we go along.
All right.
Thank you. I think I have enough to go on there. I appreciate your patience. We're making this up as we go. And it may launch beautifully at the outset, and we may get to the next meeting in August and say, well, that was a little rough. Let's put some more structure into it. So I sincerely we'll launch into it with great humility, and I again appreciate your patience as we try to figure it out. But it sounds like a really an opportunity that you're all interested in, and we certainly are willing and interested in supporting you. So thank you for digging in there, and we'll see how it all works. Were there anything else on this topic, or were there other items that the HLC wanted to talk about more broadly on the work plan, or kind of goals for the coming year that you wanted to communicate to the board?
Mark, you have a?
Yeah, well, I had a question for you, actually. Planning commissions discussions about farmsteads and agricultural resource protection. Did you get the sense that, to me, heritage And agriculture for most areas, counties with any kind of rural hinterland, as Deschutes County does, tend to be intersectional. If the planning commission has it kind of thing, I'm fine with us not ever discussing it, but I'm also fine with us. I've always been interested in the concept of heritage view sheds, historic scenic view sheds, those kinds of things as an intersection. And to the extent there's an appetite for that, would be something I would be interested in as well.
Well, it's an interesting topic. I'm relatively new to it, but I think I get the nature of it. You know, when the way that the zoning code and thus the planning commission, the board primarily engage with these things with farms is thinking about rules in association with activities that are maybe not conventionally farming. So, you know, a pumpkin patch, you know, doing a Christmas sleigh ride, you know, out with the horses, that kind of thing. Also, the other topic that came up was unmanned farm stands. So, you know, where you could have kind of a fancier version, you know, you have some sort of structure rather than just a table with the produce out on it where it's, you know, come get your eggs, leave your money situation. That was specifically what they were engaged with. But I think that's an interesting question. I don't know really to the extent that we have sort of heritage farms here that, you know, have worked over generations. It's not a type of information that we've looked to consolidate, and it's something certainly to be celebrated. You know, I don't know if there's a formal recognition process, but by all means, I know I can think of at least a couple families who've been at it, you know, through the decades, and there may be, am I headed in the right direction there?
Yes.
Yes, you.
Yeah, I think maybe a adjunct to that would be sort of scenic bike trails that do exist in Central Oregon, and scenic drives that exist throughout the state. And maybe that could accompany this concept, giving people an idea of what our natural environment looks like through personal experience by driving around or wherever it might be. Yeah.
That's interesting. It made me think about the idea that, I mean, again, limited resources, but maybe producing some sort of education or web outreach. It's like, hey, you're on this designated bike route. Here's some interesting things you could see about our cultural and historic landscape on that ride. You know, or maybe to the extent that a bike route or other scenic drive connected those resources, you know, if not, you know, as far out as maybe a driving tour for, you know, at least something that recognized, you know, like, hey, you're gonna, particularly if you took a bike ride through Sun River, there's a good chance you'd see a number of interesting things and not be aware that you were there. Not everybody knows to look for the plaques, even where they exist, and the signage. So yeah, that's something that also is an opportunity to connect people to the historic landscape.
Yeah. And well, related to that, from a state perspective, you have the Oregon Scenic Bikeways system. I think there's like 7 or 8 different defined sections. A couple of them go right through Central Oregon. The one in Tumalo is actually very well traveled. And there's, gosh, I can't even count how many of our local properties are actually, the ones that are listed are actually on that route already. So there's a fair number of them. There's also some Grange halls out on the periphery, like Powell Butte area, Powell Butte Highway, that kind of thing. So there's definitely some really, I think, good options there for getting those sources kind of highlighted somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, I know our director, Peter Gutowski, there in the room had engaged in some scenic historic bike touring in other countries. So, you know, he may have some ideas about what that might be like.
Peter appears reticent to add. I'm kidding.
Maybe there were lots of hills. Yeah.
Anyways, to me, the benefit of it seems to be that when you're talking about resource preservation, you're often talking about the economic circumstances for the private steward, right? Who attends to that resource. And to my mind, the interest is there any potential benefit to them and the stewardship and incentive, right, to retain that resource, and us doing so. I mean, there's already kind of play space, and there's probably just a lot of education and interconnection, but historic oftentimes has to do with the scenic background too. And so that's, I think it may not be agriculture, could be forestry, could be natural areas too. But that, to my mind, maybe not near term in terms of work plan, but would be something I think interesting to explore.
Mhm.
I have another question. At one point, I don't know if it still exists, but does the county still have the wildlife conservation easement that is a tax exempt status?
You know, Will, I think has more familiarity with this concept that the wildlife, you know, to the extent that someone wanted to get some tax deferral, I'm not sure,
Mhm.
you know, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, I think, has scaled back that program, because they found it's very difficult to enforce. You know, we have a landscape management combining zone that provides for basically to ensure that development in, you know, proximate to rivers and streams and certain road, you know, arterials and collectors or state highways, that is done in a way that is not just more earth tone, that is more compatible. So that remains in effect. But in terms of easements or we don't use that as a tool unless I'm, you know, unless I'm missing a certain aspect of conservation easements certainly are there along wetlands, or excuse me, on conservation easements have been a requirement, I think, in certain circumstances along rivers and streams, but that also has been an imperfect program. Is that,
Yeah, I think I'm not aware of any existing resources that get at this. You know, something that this did make me think about bike routes is that, you know, at least under the current county operations, you're allowed to have non-land use related events on properties. So things that happen less than once every 90 days. So, you know, you see, you know, people up to and including, you know, have sort of a once a year, like you could imagine something that would be like, this is the historic bike tour of Central Oregon. We've got, you know, a number of landowners who have, you know, made, you know, on this day have made access to their property possible. I mean, there's a lot that would go into this, but, you know, you could imagine that would be pretty exciting to do. And, you know, people do, you know, there might be some landowner incentive in the sense that, you know, that they, you know, you're allowed to engage in other economic activities at these sort of one-day events. You know, people frequently get a taco truck out there, or, you know, or there might be somebody else who, you know, like a small arts and crafts fair associated with it or something like that. You know, there'd be a lots of ifs, ands, and buts, and a huge amount of organizing associated with it. But that would be a way to get, you know, potentially incentivize or provide some resources to somebody who might want to show off their historic resource in an orderly way on a specific day. Again, just brainstorming. I haven't done a lot of this.
May I? I think I might have the answer to Eli's question, because easements are my day job. There is a natural resource tax credit associated, property tax credit or assessment benefit, sorry.
Yeah.
Associated with your doing a conservation easement on a piece of property that is not usually that advantageous unless it's kind of an upzone piece of property. Reason being is that assessment is not better than the agricultural or forestry assessment in terms of what you're doing. So it can be beneficial for properties that were already zoned for kind of a higher density purpose. But most of the applications of conservation easements, particularly, it's been a while since I read the statutory rules around that assessment. But getting to this commission's purpose, I don't think the state defines the natural resource tax assessment as including historic resources.
Okay.
There are federal and state programs which recognize that, but they're a little stickier to get through kind of thing. Whereas the state tax assessment is you do the easement, you apply for the assessment, assuming you did everything right, you just get it kind of thing. So the other things are a little bit more complicated. That being said, there are precedents, I think, in other counties and other parts of the country where local assessment benefits have been applied for expanding to cultural resources as well. Everything from doing special assessments on preserved facades, right?
Yeah.
To properties themselves. What I don't know in the Oregon context, right, is because revenue sharing is often between the counties and the state, like how much of that is actually in the control of the county as compared to something that would need to be modified by statute at the state level. But it does exist. There is some precedent for that kind of.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Will, would you like to move on to the next topic for the CLG grant update? I think we're probably ready to go into that.
Oh, sorry, I had started into my monologue here and I was muted.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. So, of course, the third action item is for the evening is our certified local government CLG grant. And we continued to move forward with these CLG grant tasks. And Tanya had provided some updates. First, the City of Sisters historic building hardening. They have reported that they've signed a contract with a local architect to create the downtown hardening requirements, and they're beginning immediately to put together a first draft of those guidelines. Dial. So Dial is our public GIS system that's available, and we're working with IT staff to add the downtown Redmond historic layer to Dial, and we're awaiting that GIS information. And this district is a National Register Historic District and not locally designated. So it doesn't have the same protections as a Goal 5 resource, but it's something that we're getting in our GIS layers so people can find where it is located easily. Regarding a mailer to historic properties. So one CLG task for this grant cycle is sending a postcard or letter mailer to owners of locally designated historic properties to remind them of the status, the county code, how modifications or demolitions are governed and other resources. So staff was going to guide a discussion here to develop draft language for the mailer. And so this is where you all come in this evening. Again, this would be a mailer that we'd be sending out to people who are located on our local inventory. And, we have kind of limited time or limited page space and attention. Some things that we thought about would be important to be on there would be acknowledging their resource status, getting them familiar with the codes, offering them contact information and other pertinent information. And this would be, we're hoping at this time to solicit anything else that you might think might be important in a brief outreach that we might make to properties that are listed on our local inventories.
I mean, for my purpose as well, educational effectiveness is based off the KISS concept. So for my purposes, if staff has felt like that's an adequate list, I should not add to it.
Well, we appreciate that as staff, and we have great humility. We're not, the board has retained you all, and we appreciate you showing up in the evening because you frequently think of things that we don't. And when we've guessed it right, we feel proud, and when you help us remind us something, we feel proud of you. So do let us know if there's other things that in terms of that outreach you think of. But I think we've got a good path there, unless you have other guidance on that.
Will, I have one thing I might mention. I'm thinking back to one of the last times we did an outreach for property owners, was mentioning that the story map link is available, and there is already information for a lot of the historic resources already, that if there's been a change in property ownership in the last, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years, however long it's been since we did that kind of outreach prior, that there might be some interest going to the story map, because they're all very interesting. I believe we've got a fair, if not all of the properties documented with some sort of information. There's a fair amount of content, and yeah, I think that's good as part of that knowledge and awareness of their resource.
That's a great suggestion. And we've recently gotten the ability to do shortened links and QR codes. And so we can help people from having to type in insanely long web addresses as they try to engage with those materials.
Perfect.
Phil is proud of you.
I am. And it looks like our final item this evening, of course, is a update from the chair on May Preservation Month.
Yeah. Yeah, so we are in our, we just happen to have our commission meeting in May, every year. It's pretty much, we've almost always had one. But we did do sort of there was a kickoff sort of event in, Redmond. I think it was Friday night. They did a first Friday, tour for downtown Redmond. There was a pretty good turnout, I believe. There's probably, they actually did a 2-part thing. There was a Thursday tour group that I think they had something like 30 to 35 attendees on just the tour, and then they did a follow-up one on Friday for First Friday that was a self-guided version of that. And as far as I know from some of the other Redmond commissioners, they gave us some updates that it was very well received. So I didn't get to go to any of these this year, but even despite the weather, it sounds like it was quite a great turnout. So we kept it a little bit low key this year. And in previous years, we've had more of a celebration or, an actual location for the kickoff for the month. This year, we kept it a little bit low key. And of course, the weather wasn't really cooperating that well, so it all worked out. But there's quite a bit on the list. You can, it probably would be beneficial if you're not aware of some of the events. There's a couple different flyers that are going around. There's one that one of the Redmond Landmarks commissioners created for Preservation Month. So it's got like a QR code on it and some really nice imagery, beautiful graphics. If it's something that you can distribute to your own inner circles or social media of your own, I'm happy to get that. I can probably just send, I think Tanya's been on most of the discussion strings, but since she's been out, I don't know how savvy she's been with some of that, but I'm more than happy to send the attachment PDF flyers that I've been copied on with the preservation planning group. So another one that's really nice, there's a flyer put out that was just created for the an open house for the St. Francis Catholic Church. It's going to be 2 to 3 p.m. That's Sunday, May 19th. There's actually 3 events happening just on the 19th. So the entire list, if you want to take a look, is actually on the Deschutes Historical Museum's website. They have an actual tab that's pretty easy to find. Also, the QR code that is on the Preservation Month flyer, that also links directly to the museum's website. So they have a full list of events on there, but there's tons of walking tours. Downtown Sisters has several. There's, let's see, the one in Redmond's already occurred. I believe there is, yeah, the Historic Museum, they have some heritage walking tours on the 11th and 25th. There's also quite a few presentations happening. One is going to be at Open Space Studios. That's actually, there's 2 of those, May 17th and 19th. It's called High Desert Horror and the Lava Lake Murders. And then one that I definitely want to go to is a Lunch and Learn that is being presented by Kelly Cannon Miller from Deschutes Historic Museum. And it's on the again, turning 50. This is our historic year. Bend Parks and Rec is 50 years old. It was created in 1974. And Kelly's going to be doing an interesting presentation for that at the Larkspur Community Center on Reed Market. So there's a lot going on. There's a history pub at McMenamin's. We're still getting more information on that as things go along, but that one's on historic barns. So I think that'll be very well attended. I already know that. But yeah, I'm skimming over some of them, but yeah, there's the City of Bend does a proclamation for National Historic Preservation Month. And yeah, there's quite a bit going on. Bowman Museum in Prineville, they've got two different lecture presentations as well. So we've coordinated with Bowman Museum in several years past as well. So it's always nice to be able to include Crook County on stuff. And then last but not least, on June 1st, which technically is like the day after the last day of Preservation Month, but it is the Archaeology Roadshow. Those are held almost every year at the Deschutes Historic Museum on their beautiful Reed School property. And yeah, that's a free event. Most of these are actually free. I don't believe anything. There's a lot of them that do require reservations, so just sign up. Three Sisters Historical Society, they have some events like cemetery tours. If it's a small group, they really want to make sure that you have some reservations in place for those so they can plan for it. But yeah, I feel like the group was a little bit slow to get started, but once you start kind of pulling all the events together, it actually adds up to quite the list. So it's a really robust month we have ahead of us. So yeah, I will I think Peter and Will, if that sounds like a good plan, I can just send out an email and copy you both and Tanya on that with some of the flyers that I'm aware of, and then if we can get those distributed to the rest of the commissioners. And there's some of these, if there's any ones you want to help with volunteering for, I'm sure I can get you information as well. And as always, it feels like a lot of the facilitating is done by Deschutes Historic Museum and Three Sisters Society. Bowman Museums, you can always just reach out directly to those organizations, and I'm sure they are more than willing to have some assistance and support this month. I think that's probably pretty good summary of what's going on. But yeah, we're only 6 days in. We've got there's a lot happening, and a lot of great tours, presentations, really good events. So hopefully the weather cooperates a little bit better, so better than today. All right. Is there any questions about Preservation Month? All righty. Well, with that, we segue into our Landmarks Commissioner, or any additional staff comments that anyone has. Yeah, Peter.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, I have two comments or pieces of information to share with all of you. And I see that Chris Hording Jones is also participating this evening. I want to let you know that we received an email in the middle of the month regarding signage that was at one point acknowledging the Tumalo Dam, and the fact that the Tumalo Dam, which was established in 1915, is on a Deschutes County landmark, and it's missing. So a representative from the Friends of the Tumalo Wildlife Corridor reached out to our former chairperson, and then I saw the email when I came back, having been out of the office for a few weeks. So I let Tanya know about this. She's on vacation, but we'll try to revisit how this signage occurred. and Chris, if she's available, may recall, but it was a joint effort, between Deschutes County and BLM. And if Chris Hording Jones, can recall, my institutional memory is not where it needs to be. But if Commissioner, Hording Jones has perspective or any updates that can allow us to kind of revisit how to get this sign reestablished, that's something that we can explore.
I seem to recall that also being a joint effort between the county and BLM just a long time ago. And the BLM archaeologist is since retired. And so we'd have to contact the new district archaeologist that would oversee Tumalo if you wanted to pursue this.
Okay, well, I just, more than anything, I wanted to bring this to the commission's attention, that this is a Goal 5 resource, or the remnants of it, the location. It is a historic site. We're aware that the sign we're aware the sign is missing. And so we'll kind of chase that down, and Commissioner Hording Jones, we may end up, reaching out to you, or if you have that individual's, your colleague's contact information, if you wanted to send that to Tanya Saltzman, we can see if it's possible to revisit that signage, consistent with our sign code and past practices.
Actually, I'll see him next week, so I'll mention it to him.
Okay, great. And we'll just see what we can do accordingly. I had a second item. This was an email that was forwarded to me this morning, in regards to the Camp Polk Cemetery. And the challenge is, I guess there's a new ownership group that's overseeing that cemetery. This is a cemetery next to the Camp Polk Meadow. It's a cemetery that has not had a lot of representation. And what's happened over the years is it's been used, if someone has a backhoe, to bury a friend, a family member at the cemetery with no real oversight. It's just kind of something that's been attractive, kind of like the old West. And there's been an organization, as I understand it, that's trying to manage this historic site in a way that protects the integrity of those that have been buried. They're struggling financially. Kelly Cannon Miller reached out to Nick Lilac, our county administrator, to talk about this new opportunity, this arrangement with the Land Trust, the Historical Society, this new organization. I think they're looking for county to take ownership of based on the email, they're exploring if that's a possibility. So more than anything, I wanted to just bring this to your attention, that we do have this is another local historic site. In the past, we did some Halloween kind of good-natured ghost tours there. It is a remarkable location, and nonetheless, it is vulnerable. So more to come on that, but to the extent as you're thinking about these themes or these subgroups, this could be a topic that could be further explored. So more than anything, I just wanted to bring it to your attention, and we'll just kind of like the signage at the Tumalo Dam, we'll just keep you abreast of this situation and how it's evolving.
Is this something worthy of a presentation at a future meeting?
Potentially, it could be from the Historical Society. We could reach out to Kelly Cannon Miller, who is the one that initiated this respectful, I think, request or exploration. So yes, if it's, I will forward this email chain to Will and Tanya. I didn't do it first thing this morning, but because my focus was to bring it to your attention. But if it's something that you think is worthy of an agenda topic, Tanya can certainly reach out to Kelly Cannon Miller and this new organization that sounds like they're committed to representing this historical site, it's just the ownership issue makes it problematic. So Commissioner Hudson and to your colleagues, if this is something that's of interest of you to the commission, we can certainly coordinate and you could get a more updated version than what I'm providing currently.
Yeah, I mean, if county ownership is part of the potential mix, I mean, if we're not needed, we're not needed, but I have been in the position of having preserves with historic cemeteries on them, and the legal consequences of that are both complex.
Yeah.
Particularly if they don't know where the bodies are buried.
Yeah, or who the bodies are. I mean, my understanding, the county has a role. There was an example, I guess, near Pilot Butte. There was a cemetery that was being neglected. And I could give you the precise thing, and I just closed the laptop, but in 2021, under statute, if it's determined that the cemetery is in disrepair, I think the county has a role to come in respectfully and relocate those that have been buried at that cemetery to a different location. But your point is well taken. I don't know, and it's not CDD's purview to kind of facilitate or navigate the ownership of a cemetery. There's certain liability that comes with it, and responsibility. But I think Kelly Cannon Miller with the Historical Society is just looking for partnerships. So credit to her to recognize that it's an important site and just explore the roles in a potential partnership with Deschutes County in terms of property management. So it is complicated though, nonetheless. And at this particular site, it has been problematic for years.
Yeah, so I guess besides the ownership question, is there a request that they're making?
There was a request from, I think, to Kelly Cannon Miller very delicately to see if this would be something that Deschutes County might be willing to explore. Is in partners, the land trust owns the land around it as part of the Camp Polk Meadow. You have this organization that's willing to do the outreach and say, we're no longer, or this site is no longer suitable for burials. And then I think the third leg of that stool is there someone like Deschutes County that could own it while maybe allowing the operation and maintenance and the education to other entities. So this is a very fresh email because it was relayed this morning. So it may be something that may be worth monitoring, at least, or tracking to understand how this is evolving.
I'm assuming it is a historic cemetery, correct?
It is. It's on our Goal 5 resource.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very interesting site.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I have. Yeah. It would seem like it's within our purview to at least educate ourselves more about the maybe implications of doing something or not doing something. I defer to my other two colleagues, but okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's so I mean, for the time being, I mean, just as under staff comments and Will, as Will and I kind of communicate to Tanya, it seems ripe for an update. It is a goal. It's on our inventory. There have been tours that have been offered there pre-pandemic, and it is part of a region that is seeing significant restoration ecologically. And there, our former chairperson, Kelly Matting, I mean, there's a lot of history in that area that is worth preserving or maintaining. So we can certainly communicate this to Tanya and see if Kelly Cannon Miller is available, and even maybe the representatives of this new organization that's trying to, I don't know if they don't now have fee title, but anyway, their efforts to try to protect and enhance this area while minimizing the disruptions that come with people that think they can just use it as a burial site. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot can happen between here and August, but for my purposes, if it's still something that needs consultation at
Yeah.
that point.
We can maybe communicate that to Kelly Miller if it's still a topic that's really warranted. The Historic Landmarks Commission would value an update. Right.
I could definitely see this as a topic that we will be discussing quite a bit in the future, just as we have in the past too. Yeah, you're right. It's I've heard about the issues, so it's not, honestly, it's not surprising. So. All right. Peter, was there any other topics that you had from staff?
Those are the only two topics I had. Will may have other remarks that he wants to share, but thank you for the opportunity and I think a very enriching meeting tonight. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Dennis, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I have a question relative to the dam sign. And I'm curious, has any signage ever been discussed that points to the original town site there out in the meadow beyond the dam?
Not that I have ever heard of. Yeah, there's been
Is
some.
that
There's been
something?
we've
could
definitely
be-
done some tours, and there's a little bit of research that obviously Kelly Madden is probably the spearhead of that, a lot of that, but as far as I know, there's not any signage out there by the homestead.
If we're going to be replacing signage, is that something we might want to consider adding?
It's certainly a possibility. We need to find, the right location and who's owning it and whatnot. And I can't, and Chris Horton Jones may recall, I don't remember where the sign for the Tumalo Dam was located. That might have been with the partnership with BLM. That might have just been on a sliver of right of way that the BLM owned, or possibly in county right of way. But those are all factors that would have to be considered.
Excellent. Any other comments, suggestions? All righty. Well, I think with that, we can adjourn our May 6th Preservation Month meeting. It's 7:08 p.m. So yeah, we will reconvene here probably through email or yeah, if not any sooner than by August. So meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.